Rebuilding America with union labor is smart for business and the American public. Unions provide, in one word, democracy in the workplace. By the way, Amazon, here we come.
President Biden speaking at a labor convention there. That was just days after the Amazon warehouse had workers celebrate their first ever unionization in the U.S., the first labor union at Amazon. It's a David versus Goliath story, workers fighting the billionaire Amazon founder Jeff Bezos. Now there's news that, well, the company is fighting back. There's a report that on internal Amazon documents, they have a messaging app that employees can use, but it would block employees from even using words like union or pay raise or anything that's seen as a critique of the company internally, according to reporting by The Intercept. Amazon tells The Guardian it would only screen words that it deems offensive or harassing. I'm joined now by Paul Krugman, Nobel Prize-winning economist and columnist for The New York Times. Welcome back.
Hi there.
What is the significance of these workers unionizing at Amazon?
Well, if we're going to have a rebirth of unionization in America, and unions are what made America once upon a time a middle-class country. And it was the loss of unions that did so much to turn us into the extremely unequal nation we are now. Amazon is exactly the kind of company where unions should be able to really make a lot of progress. And the fact that the unions finally won one, despite all of the tactics that Amazon continues to use to try and suppress them, that's at least potentially a very, very big deal.
Yeah, we heard from the organizer, Christian Smalls, who led this. Here's a little bit of what he said when we spoke to him here on The Beat.
I used to tell my new hires, if you have a gym membership, you have to cancel it because you're doing 10 to 12 hours of calisthenics. Your break is only 30 minutes. You're being tracked for every single second that you're not scanning an item. We're so disconnected from society. All we know is Amazon. And, when customers support this company, they got to understand our voices matter, too.
I'm curious, Professor, what you think about that part of big tech that we don't always really face. We hear a lot about the knowledge economy and working from home and what people can do in informational sectors. But big tech companies like Amazon are still built on what that person who was involved in it says is really tough, backbreaking labor.
Yeah, Amazon, in a way, thrives on an illusion. It looks like a Star Trek replicator or something, right? You click a button and what you want appears, and it doesn't look as if there's any human toil involved. But the reality is the ability of Amazon to deliver stuff to you in a day or two in a major metropolitan area depends upon having this vast network of fulfillment centers close to places like Staten Island, to serve Metro New York, which employ 1 million workers now. Amazon it looks like this cyberspace website, but it really is. It's a massive labor force, and it's a labor force that's really, really badly treated. It's a labor force that is policed, has very little personal freedom, is paid low wages. It's exactly the kind of company where you ought to have a union, and where the usual argument, well, we can't have unionization because how can we compete internationally? Well, you can't replace a fulfillment center on Staten Island with one in China, right? So this is exactly the kind of company that can and should be unionized, and but it has up until now been extremely successful at basically browbeating workers into not supporting unions. And so it's a big deal that this time the workers won.
Yeah, no, and you put it very clearly, and that's really interesting thinking about it like that. I want to turn to the prices that everyone's paying for all kinds of stuff, the inflation. Professor, you win Nobel Prizes and accolades sometimes for really spending years thinking about stuff that most of us probably never think about at all. Now here's an area where your expertise is something that everyone's thinking about and feeling, and it's not fair the way some of this macroeconomic stuff works, because as you know, and you've given a lot of your work to focusing on these problems, it hurts working people a lot more than really rich people when we see these price surges. It's wiping out salary increases and other things. Here's what AOC had to say about her view of what companies are doing amidst the inflation. Take a listen.
When 4 companies control almost 60% of an industry, the normal supply-demand curve doesn't really set the price, does it? All of these things that our prices are fair and price hikes are just the result of just completely natural, competitive environment that starts to fall away when the U.S. economy transforms into an oligopoly.
My question for you is economic and not political. How much of this is about economic forces, and how much of it is, as some critics have alleged, about companies taking advantage of these conditions to stick it to consumers all the more?
Well, look, most of the inflation is economic forces. I mean, global oil prices are up, wheat prices are up. There are supply chain problems. And the economy is running very hot. It's like a car engine that's running way above the red line on RPM. So all of that is not what AOC is talking about. And you should know that a lot of my colleagues in economics very much hate it when people like me say this, but I think there is, in fact, something to what she's saying. I mean, in an environment when you have a lot of inflation for these other reasons, companies that have the ability to set prices, companies have always been greedy, but they tend to be restrained by the outrage factor. If a company just suddenly slaps on a 20% price increase for no obvious reason, people get mad. But if prices are going up on lots of things, then the company may feel, hey, we can get away with this without getting a customer backlash, without getting a political backlash. And that, I think it's actually silly not to think that that isn't part. It's only part. It wouldn't be possible if all this other stuff wasn't going on, but that's part of why we're seeing so much inflation.
Interesting. Some people may not know this, but whenever you agree to do an interview, you say you always want to talk about Mitch McConnell for a few minutes of the interview, just because, you're so interested in him.
All right. It's new to me, too. That's okay.
I'm kidding. So folks know Paul doesn't have any conditions. But we are living in these extraordinary times where the level of extremism and both political and policy hijacking is quite acute. And so he was asked some questions here that I want to share, just to how he puts it, when it comes to whether there's any morality left in his leadership of the Republican Party in the Senate. Take a look.
Where do you draw your moral red lines? So moral red lines, where do you draw them?
I'm perfectly comfortable with the way I have conducted my political career.
You said Donald Trump's actions preceding the January 6th insurrection were a, quote, disgraceful dereliction of duty. How do you go from saying that to 2 weeks later saying you'd absolutely support Donald Trump?
No,
which is
not at all inconsistent.
Not at all inconsistent, and yet, Professor, this was someone who let it be known that he thought Donald Trump, in the days after the 6th, committed convictable offenses in an attempted coup, and now is in reverse in public. What do you make of all this?
Well, Mitch McConnell is not, Steve Bannon. I don't think that he is personally an ethno-nationalist or anything. What he is somebody who is willing to sacrifice everything, to sacrifice all the principles of democracy, all the principles of fair play in order to have lower taxes on rich people, basically. The amazing thing about Mitch McConnell is that he's somebody who has, I'm probably getting in trouble, he sold his soul for the sake of a tax cut. And it's the most amazing thing that he does not, at some point, look in the mirror and say, my God, what have I done? Aren't there things that Trump, unfortunately, aren't there things that trump the questions of conservative economic policy? But in McConnell's behavior, the answer is no. Nothing matters except pushing the country towards a more unequal distribution of income, pushing our economic policy to the right.
Wow. Yeah. Well, and as you say, it's a really distinct contrast to people who have some set of beliefs, whatever they may be, but in a way it makes it all the more dangerous because of who he's dealing with and what he's willing to do. Paul Krugman, as always, good to hear from you, sir. Thank you.